Picture this, a dim workshop in the palace of King Minos, where the air hums with the tension of a desperate mind at work. Daedalus, the legendary craftsman, paces the room, his thoughts racing like the tides outside the prison walls that hold him. His young son, Icarus, watches silently, eyes wide with a mix of wonder and unease as his father sketches something extraordinary. Wings, not of gods or birds, but of feathers and wax. A daring escape plan that could mean freedom or disaster. This is where our story begins, a tale of ambition, ingenuity, and the fragile line between soaring triumph and tragic downfall. And to you, listening right now wherever you are in the world, whether it's late at night or the quiet hush of dawn, we'd love to know, what time is it for you? Drop a comment below and let us join you on this journey into one of mythology's most haunting cautionary tales. The myth of Icarus isn't just about wax wings melting under the sun's relentless gaze. It's a mirror held up to human nature, itself our relentless drive to push boundaries, to reach higher, even when the risks whisper warnings in our ears. Daedalus, the brilliant inventor, crafts these wings not just as tools of escape, but as symbols of human ingenuity, a defiance of the limits placed upon him. Yet, woven into this brilliance is a father's fear, the unspoken dread that his son's youthful exuberance might tip the scales from courage to recklessness. Can you feel it? The weight of that moment, the exhilaration of flight, paired with the crushing vulnerability of knowing how easily it could all unravel. So why does this ancient story still grip us today? Perhaps because in some way, we've all been Icarus daring to dream beyond what seems possible, only to learn the hard way that every ambition carries its own price. Or maybe we've been Daedalus, burdened with wisdom that feels like a curse, watching those we love dance dangerously close to edges we know too well. As we explore the layers of this myth, the theories behind its warnings, the lessons hidden in its wings, you'll find yourself reflecting on the flights you've taken in your own life. The risks that called to you, the falls that taught you, and the heights you still long to reach. So settle in, and let's unravel this timeless story together, one feather at a time. Daedalus moves through the palace aviary like a shadow, his fingers plucking feathers with the precision of a man who knows time is slipping away. Each one is chosen carefully, long, sturdy primaries for the wing's backbone, softer down to fill the gaps. His hands shake not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what these feathers must carry, their freedom, their lives. Nearby, Icarus scrambles to keep up, his own arms piled high with stolen plumage. But youth betrays him. A sudden stumble, and a cascade of feathers scatters across the stone floor. Daedalus whirls, his voice sharp as a blade. Careful, boy. These aren't toys. The words hang heavy between them, and Icarus flinches, not from the reprimand, but from the unspoken truth beneath it. His father's fear is as palpable as the wax melting in the workshop's fire. Watch how Daedalus works every feather placed just so, each dip of wax measured to hold without weighing them down. There's poetry in his movements, the way a master craftsman turns desperation into art. The first wing takes shape, curving like a seabird's, its surface a patchwork of borrowed grace. Yet for all its beauty, it's achingly fragile. A gust of wind, a moment's hesitation, and the whole thing could unravel. That's the heart of this scene, isn't it? The tension between creation and catastrophe. The way Daedalus pours his genius into something so easily undone. And Icarus, restless, burning with the need to prove himself, sees only the thrill of flight, not the brittleness of the wings beneath his fingers. You can almost taste the frustration simmering between them. Daedalus, with his hard-won wisdom, knows the sky's dangers, the sun's heat, the ocean's pull, the thin line between flying and falling. But to Icarus, every warning feels like a chain. Why shouldn't he soar higher? Why must his father's caution clip his wings before they've even left the ground? It's a clash as old as time. The cautious architect versus the reckless dreamer, each blind to the other's truth. And as those waxen wings glint in the firelight, half finished and trembling with potential, we're left wondering, whose lesson will the sky teach? The one who fears the fall, or the one who refuses to see it coming? The night air is thick with salt and secrecy as Daedalus kneels behind his son, tightening the last straps of wax and feathers against Icarus' trembling shoulders. His voice is barely above a whisper, but each word carries the weight of a prophecy. Stay level, boy, not too low, or the sea's damp breath will clog these wings. Not too high, or the sun's fire will undo us both. Icarus nods impatiently, but his eyes are already alight, fixed on the sliver of moon above them like a target. The warnings roll off him like water from a duck's back, because what does the sky care for rules? What does freedom know of limits? Daedalus steps back, wiping his palms on his tunic, though nothing can erase the slick dread clinging to him. He watches as Icarus spreads his wings for the first time, really spreads them, and the sight steals his breath. The boy is radiant, transformed, as if the wings were always meant to be part of him. But then comes the first lurching step off the cliff's edge, the frantic flap of untested limbs, and for one heart-stopping moment, the world tilts. Icarus drops like a stone, only to catch the wind at the last second, soaring upward with a whoop of triumph that echoes across the waves. Relief floods Daedalus, but it's a fragile thing, because he knows the difference between luck and skill, and he sees the way his son's flight wavers, how his movements are all enthusiasm and no precision. The island shrinks below them as they rise, the dark water swallowing the evidence of their escape. Daedalus flies as he builds, methodical, measured, every beat of his wings, a calculated effort. But Icarus, he's a spark in the wind, darting and looping, drunk on the sheer impossibility of it all. And that's the cruelest twist, isn't it? The very thing that makes his flight glorious. That reckless, unfiltered joy is what will undo him. Because the sky isn't just freedom, it's a test. And Daedalus, for all his genius, can't engineer the one thing his son truly needs, restraint. So they fly onward, the distance between them growing not just in space, but in understanding. With every passing moment, the old man's warnings fade further from Icarus' mind, replaced by the siren song of the horizon. And high above the waking world, where the air thins and the light gilds everything in gold, the line between triumph and tragedy wears thinner by the second. Dawn spills across the horizon like molten gold as their feet leave solid ground behind. That first breathless moment of weightlessness, when the wind snatches at their makeshift wings and the world tilts sideways, sends Icarus' heart hammering against his ribs. His laughter rings out wild and unburdened, as he twists midair, drunk on the sudden realization they're flying, really flying. Below them, Crete's jagged cliffs blur into insignificance. The palace walls that once caged them now just toothpick lines against the sand. But Daedalus doesn't share his son's euphoria. His every muscle strains to keep steady, his gaze darting between the boy's reckless spirals and the endless stretch of sea ahead, a blue expanse that offers no mercy if those fragile wings fail. You can almost hear the old man's voice fraying as he shouts into the wind, his warnings sliced apart by the roar of rushing air. Stay close, stay low. But Icarus is already arcing upward, chasing the sun's newborn warmth like a moth to flame. There's something terrifyingly beautiful in how he moves, all instinct and adrenaline, no strategy. Where Daedalus calculates each beat of his wings, Icarus surrenders to the sky's whims, spinning and diving as if gravity itself were a game. And for a fleeting moment, it's easy to forget this isn't just joy, it's defiance. Every loop, every reckless climb is a silent scream at the world that tried to clip his wings. Yet the sea beneath them tells another story. Its surface glitters innocently, but the distance between Crete and safety yawns wider with every passing second. Daedalus knows the numbers, the wax's melting point, the feather's endurance, the cruel mathematics of fatigue. But numbers mean nothing to Icarus, whose too busy tracing figure aids through wisps of cloud. And that's the tragedy taking shape before our eyes. Two versions of freedom colliding, one hard-earned and measured, a survivor's calculus, the other boundless and bright, a dreamer's blind faith. The island vanishes behind them, but the real gulf isn't the one filling with salt water. It's the space between a father's fear and a son's fearless grin as the sun climbs higher, painting those waxen wings in liquid gold. The sun isn't just warm now, it's a siren pulling Icarus upward with invisible fingers. Each beat of his wings sends him spiraling closer, the light so bright it bleaches the sky around him into a dizzying white. Daedalus shouts dissolve into the wind, meaningless noise against the roar of blood in Icarus' ears. He doesn't feel the first feather slip free, doesn't notice the way the wax along his left wing beads like sweat, droplets scattering into the void below. All he knows is the heat on his face, the way it fills his chest like he's swallowed a piece of the sun itself. For the first time in his life, no one is telling him no. And that's the cruelest trick of pride, how it muffles every warning. Daedalus' voice cracks with desperation as he veers sharply, trying to cut beneath his son's reckless ascent. But Icarus only laughs, the sound thin and giddy at this altitude. He stretches his arms wider, as if to embrace the very thing that will undo him. The wings shudder, just once, a tremor so slight it could be mistaken for turbulence. But Daedalus sees it. His stomach plummets faster than any free fall. He knows the signs, the way the wax glistens too brightly, the feathers sagging like wet parchment. Every instinct screams to grab Icarus, to drag him down by force, but the sky offers no handholds. Watch how the tragedy unfolds in slow motion. A single feather detaches, spinning lazily toward the sea. Then another. The structure of the wing bows inward, the careful craftsmanship buckling under the sun's relentless gaze. Still, Icarus tilts his face upward, eyes squinted against the glare. He doesn't feel the collapse coming not until the right wing folds like a crumpled leaf. The lurch is violent, his body twisting midair as one side gives way entirely. For a heartbeat, he hangs there, suspended between triumph and freefall, his expression shifting from euphoria to dawning horror. Below, Daedalus reaches uselessly toward him, his own wings straining as he screams a name that the wind tears away. The last thing Icarus sees before the sky lets go of him is his father's face, a portrait of anguish, framed by the very wings he built to save them. Then the world tilts, and the sun vanishes behind him as the sea rushes up to meet its offering. The wax melts faster now, feathers scattering like discarded prayers, and in that final, weightless moment, a question hangs in the air between them, unanswered. Was it the sun's betrayal, or the boy's own hunger for it, that sealed his fate? A sudden gust snaps like an invisible hand against Icarus' left wing, and the world tilts violently. One moment he's soaring, drunk on sunlight the next. He's a leaf caught in a storm, spinning end over end as the stolen feather spirals into the abyss below. His stomach lurches, arms flailing against the empty air as if he could claw back his balance. Panic etches itself into every muscle, the wide-eyed terror of a creature that's flown too high to remember how to fall. Daedalus' voice reaches him in fragments, shredded by the wind. Angle your. I don't fight but the words scatter like the feathers now loosening from his wings, useless against the chaos. The sun, once a golden companion, becomes a merciless judge. Its heat licks at the wax seams, softening them into glistening rivulets that streak down the wing's frame. Icarus' breath comes in ragged gasps as he finally rights himself, but the damage is done. The structure groans under his weight, feathers ruffling like a bird shaken by a predator. His confidence, so unshakable moments ago, cracks like thin ice. For the first time, he understands the fragility of the miracle strapped to his back. Every dip, every wobble screams the truth. These wings were never meant to conquer the heavens. They're a desperate man's gamble, and the house always wins. Daedalus veers sharply, his own wings slicing through the air with practiced precision. But the gap between them yawns wider with every heartbeat, stretched thin by Icarus' earlier recklessness. The old man's face is a mask of horror. He doesn't need to see the wax to know what's coming. He's calculated the melting point, measured the sun's arc, foreseen this exact moment in 100 nightmares. Yet here, suspended between sky and sea, he's powerless. All his genius, all his warnings, reduced to watching his son's wings unravel stitch by stitch. Icarus' right wing buckles first, the topmost feathers surrendering to gravity. He jerks sideways, a marionette with half its strings cut, and the motion sends another cluster of wax tearing free. The wind whistles through the gaps now, a mocking echo of his earlier laughter. His hands scramble at the straps, as if he could hold the disintegrating wings together through sheer will. But the sun isn't done with him yet. It presses down, relentless, melting not just the wax but the last remnants of his defiance. The boy who dared to touch the sky now pleads with it, eyes wide, lips moving in silent prayer. But the sky has no mercy for those who forget their place. Below them, the sea stretches endless and indifferent, its surface dappled with sunlight like 1,000 watching eyes. It doesn't care about fathers and sons, about hubris or love. It only waits, and as Icarus' left wing folds in on itself with a wet, sickening crunch, The question isn't whether he'll fall, but whether the fall itself is the lesson or the price. The crack echoes like thunder, sharp and final, a sound no father should ever hear. Icarus' right wing crumples inward, the delicate lattice of wax and feathers surrendering to the sun's relentless heat. For one suspended heartbeat, he hangs in the air, arms outstretched as if the sky might suddenly take pity and cradle him. Then gravity claims its due. His scream splits the heavens, raw and primal, a sound that scrapes against Daedalus' soul as he wheels desperately toward his son. But the distance between them is a chasm too wide for wings to cross. Watch the way Icarus falls not straight down, but spiraling, like a leaf torn from a branch in a storm. His remaining wing flaps wildly, a grotesque parody of flight, only hastening his descent. The sea below isn't just water now, it's a gaping maw, its surface shimmering with cruel indifference. Daedalus' own wings beat frantic, useless arcs through the air, his voice shredding into the wind as he shouts his son's name over and over. But the boy can't answer. The impact is mercifully hidden by a cresting wave, the ocean swallowing Icarus whole, without so much as a ripple to mark where he vanished. The silence afterward is worse than the scream. It presses against Daedalus' eardrums, thick and suffocating, as he hovers over the empty stretch of water. His mind races, bargaining with the fates. Maybe the wings held just long enough. Maybe the boy knows how to swim. Maybe this is another nightmare from which he'll wake sweating but relieved. But the sea offers no reprieve. No struggling figure breaks the surface. Only the sun glares down, its work done, the wax on Daedalus' own wings, now slick with something far colder than sunlight. And here's the cruelest twist. He can't even stop. The shore is still miles away, his strength already waning. Every instinct screams to dive after his son, to let the waves take him too. But survival, that stubborn, unyielding force, won't let his wings obey. So he flies on, each beat of his wings a betrayal, the weight of his grief so immense it's a wonder he doesn't plummet straight into the depths. Behind him, the sea smooths over as if nothing ever happened. Ahead, the horizon stretches empty, a lifetime of solitude waiting to claim him. What do you do when the very thing you built to save becomes the instrument of loss? Daedalus' hands, still sticky with wax, tremble not from fatigue, but from the unbearable truth. His genius was never enough. The wings were flawless in design, yes, but they couldn't compensate for the human heart's hunger to soar too close to the light. And as the last echoes of Icarus' cry fade from the air, Daedalus realizes the sky hasn't just taken his son, it's taken his name too. Forever after, he won't be remembered as the greatest inventor of his age. Just the father who watched his child fall. The sand burns beneath Daedalus' knees as he crashes onto the shore, his wings, once a masterpiece of ingenuity, now sagging like broken promises. The wax has hardened into grotesque shapes, feathers jutting at unnatural angles where the sun's fury warped them during his endless flight. Villagers gather in a hushed semicircle, their eyes wide with awe at this hollow-eyed man who fell from the sky. But Daedalus doesn't see them. His gaze is locked on the horizon, where the last traces of sunlight gild the very spot where the sea swallowed his son whole. His fingers claw at the straps, tearing the ruined wings from his back with a violence that makes the onlookers gasp. The The contraption that was supposed to save them now feels like a grotesque mockery, every feather a reminder of his failure. He stumbles toward the tree line, clutching the wreckage to his chest like a corpse, until his legs give out beneath him. The soil is cool and yielding as he digs, his nails splitting against roots and stones, but he doesn't stop until the hole is deep enough to bury the wings, and the part of his soul that dared to think he could outwit the gods. The villagers' whispers slither around him like mist. They speak of the boy who flew too close to the sun, their voices tinged with morbid fascination. Already, the details distort. Some claim Icarus' wings were gilded, others insist the gods struck him down with a thunderbolt. With each retelling, his son becomes less a boy and more a symbol, a cautionary fable stripped of its humanity. Daedalus wants to scream the truth, that Icarus laughed when the wind first caught his wings, that his hands tremble the night before their flight, not from fear but excitement. But grief has stolen his voice. Night falls, and still he kneels by the makeshift grave, the salt of dried tears cracking on his cheeks. The stars emerge, cold and indifferent, and it's then he realizes the cruelest irony of all. The sky he once sought to conquer has become a prison. Every glance upward is a knife twist, every cloud a taunting echo of wings he can never unsee. And as the villagers retreat to their fires, leaving him alone with his guilt, Daedalus does something far worse than crumble. He stands, walks, breathes. Because the world, relentless in its cruelty, keeps turning, even for those who no longer recognize themselves in its reflection. Years blur into one another like waves erasing footprints in the sand. Daedalus no longer measures time in sunrises, but in the deepening grooves of the memorial he carves into the cliffside, a boy with wings, forever frozen mid-flight. His hands, once capable of crafting labyrinths and miracles, now falter over the stone, the chisel slipping as often as it strikes true. Age has stolen his precision, but grief has taken far more. Each chip of rock that falls into the sea below might as well be another piece of his heart. The locals speak in hushed tones when they pass him, their pity thick as the salt air. They don't see the artist or the inventor anymore, just a hollow-eyed old man who talks to the wind, and maybe they're right, because when Daedalus presses his palm against the half-finished wings of the stone Icarus, he isn't carving a tribute. He's bargaining with the past. Should I have let you fall sooner? He whispers to the empty horizon. Would a harder lesson have kept you grounded? The sea sighs against the rocks, its rhythm as indifferent as the gods he once dared to defy. Stories have a way of escaping their tellers. Already, whispers of the boy who flew too close to the sun slither through harbor towns and olive groves, each version more twisted than the last. In one, Icarus is a fool who ignored divine warnings. In another, he's a rebel punished for daring to touch the heavens. The truth, the messy, human truth of a father's love and a son's reckless joy gets sanded down into something simpler, a moral. A warning. Daedalus hears these tales in tavern corners, his fists clenching under the table as strangers reduce his son to a punchline, but he never corrects them. What would be the point? Some nights, when the moon bleaches the cliff silver, he swears he hears laughter on the wind, not the shrill, triumphant cry Icarus made as he climbed, but the quiet, breathless giggles of the boy he once was, before wax and wings and consequence. Daedalus will turn, heart hammering, only to find the ledge empty. And so the carving grows, each strike of the hammer a plea to the universe. Remember him as he was. Not the cautionary tale, not the symbol, just a boy who loved the feel of the wind in his hair. But time is the one thing even genius cannot outmaneuver. The memorial will never be finished, not because Daedalus lacks the skill, but because some wounds refuse to close. And when his hands finally still for good, the cliff will bear his unanswered questions for centuries, etched in stone beside the sun he couldn't save. The bard's lute strings hum through the smoky tavern air, each note plucked with the showman's flair of someone who's never lost anything more precious than a coin purse. Behold the daring Icarus, he cries, his voice swelling as the crowd leans in. The boy who spat in the eye of the gods, who chased the sun like a lover. The words are honeyed, intoxicating, a version of the story where the fall is just a dramatic flourish, not a father's shattered world. Daedalus sits in the shadowed corner, his untouched wine reflecting the firelight like spilled blood. Listen to how the tale twists in the telling. The bard's Icarus isn't a reckless child. He's a defiant champion, his wax wings gilded in the telling, his motives polished into something noble. The crowd roars when the bard mimes the plunge, gasps when he describes the sun's fury, as if it were a duel between equals, not a boy's hubris meeting the universe's indifference. Daedalus' fingers tighten around his cup. They've turned his son's death into entertainment, his grief into a rhyming couplet. A woman near the hearth wipes laughter tears from her cheeks. Serves the gods right, she slurs to her companion. Someone had to shake their thrones. The words slither into Daedalus' ears, poison dressed as praise. He wants to shake them all, to scream that Icarus wasn't some rebel philosopher, just a boy who loved the wind in his hair, who trusted his father's hands until the moment they couldn't save him. But the truth is too heavy for this room, too real for people who want a song, not a scar. The bard bows to thunderous applause, his pockets jingling with tossed coins. As the crowd clamors for an encore, Daedalus pushes back his bench. The movement catches the bard's eye. Recognition flashes there, a flicker of unease. For a heartbeat, their gazes lock, the spinner of pretty lies and the man who knows the weight of the truth. Then the moment breaks. The bard grins, launching into another verse, louder this time, as if volume could drown out the quiet man retreating into the night. Outside, the stars are sharp as broken glass. Daedalus walks until the tavern's noise fades, until all that's left is the whisper of the sea against the rocks, the same sound that cradled his son's last breath. Some stories aren't meant to be sung, some griefs refuse to rhyme, and as the wind carries the bard's final, triumphant note over the water, Daedalus does the only thing left to him. He lets the truth stay buried, where only the waves can hear it. The philosopher's voice rings across the marble hall, polished and certain as a blade. Hubris, he declares, tracing the word in the air like an equation solved, the fatal flaw of all who dare too much. Around him, scholars murmur their approval, quills scratching parchment as they reduce Icarus' last moments to tidy maxims. None notice the hunched figure in the back, Daedalus, his once proud shoulders bowed beneath a traveler's cloak, fingers clenched around a wine cup he has no intention of drinking from. Listen to how easily they dissect his son's life. The philosopher paints Icarus as a fool who ignored divine order, his wax wings mere props in a morality play. One scholar compares him to Phaethon, another to Bellerophon, as if grief could be measured in mythic parallels. Their words are clean, surgical, stripping the blood and breath from the boy who used to sneak into Daedalus' workshop, who once wept over an injured sparrow, whose laughter could shake the dust from the rafters. Daedalus' knuckles whiten around the cup. These men speak of hubris as if it were some abstract sin, not the desperate hope of a father who promised his child freedom. They've never felt wax grow soft under their fingers, never known the terror of watching someone you love rise too fast, too far. A young acolyte raises his hand, eager. But surely, he ventures, the story's power lies in its universality, a warning for all who overreach. The philosopher beams, delighted. Precisely. The wings were never the point. It's about knowing your place. Something snaps in Daedalus then. Not loudly, just the faintest exhale. The sound of a man realizing no one in this room will ever understand. He sets down the cup, the wine inside untouched. Let them have their metaphors. Let them turn his son's bones into scaffolding for their neat philosophies. The truth is messier, heavier. It lives in the way his hands still twitch at dusk, reaching for a boy who won't come home. It's in the nightmares where he carves wings that never melt, and Icarus lands laughing on some distant shore. As the debate swirls on, Daedalus slips into the courtyard. Above him, the sky is mercilessly blue. Somewhere beyond these walls, the sea still churns over the spot where his son fell. But here, in this temple of ideas, Icarus is already hardening into legend, a cautionary tale scrubbed clean of sweat and terror, and the particular way sunlight caught in his hair as he soared. Daedalus tips his face upward, letting the sun sear his eyelids shut. Let the scholars have their lessons. He'll keep the weight of the boy in his arms, the hitch in his voice when he called for help that never came. Some truths are too heavy for parchment. The charcoal smudges against the young artist's fingertips as he leans over his sketch, the tavern's flickering lamplight casting long shadows across the parchment. His Icarus is beautiful in freefall, arms outstretched, eyes closed, a smile playing at his lips as if the rushing wind were a lover's embrace. The lines are fluid, almost reverent, transforming tragedy into something transcendent. He doesn't hear the bench scrape behind him, doesn't notice the ragged breathing of the old man looming over his shoulder until the shadow swallows the page. Daedalus' hand trembles as he snatches the drawing, his yellowed nails biting into the paper. For a heartbeat, he stares at the serene face of the boy who never existed, this fearless, blissful Icarus, and something inside him fractures. The tear is louder than he expects, a sharp rip that splits the sketch clean down the middle. The artist gasps, lurching to his feet. Why would you? It's art, it's truth. His voice cracks with the indignation of youth, the certainty that beauty outweighs pain. But Daedalus isn't looking at him. His gaze is locked on the ruined halves of the sketch, his breath coming in ragged bursts. Truth, he snarls, and the word is a blade twisted in his own ribs. You think he smiled, you think he welcomed it. The tavern falls silent around them, cups halfway to lips. Daedalus' voice drops to a whisper, but it carries like a funeral bell. He screamed until the sea stole his voice. The artist stumbles back, his face pale. This isn't the grand myth he learned at his tutor's knee. This is something raw, something alive. He opens his mouth to protest, but the old man's eyes stop him cold. There's no madness there, no senile rage, only a grief so precise it could cut glass. You don't get to make him brave, Daedalus rasps. He was 12 years old. He called for me, he was afraid. The boy flees, his sandals slapping against the stone floor, leaving the torn sketch fluttering to the ground like a wounded bird. Daedalus doesn't watch him go. He's too busy staring at the fragments in his hands. The serene Icarus now split in two. How many times must he bury his son? First in the sea, then in stone, now in the lies of poets and fools who think fear is something to be painted over. The lamplight gutters, stretching his shadow long and thin across the wall. A bent figure, alone with the weight of a truth no one wants to hear. Outside, the wind picks up, carrying the scent of salt and the distant cry of gulls. Somewhere beyond the harbor, the waves still churn over the place where Icarus fell. But here, in this dim corner of the world, the only sound is the slow, deliberate crumple of parchment as Daedalus grinds the sketch to dust beneath his heel. Let them have their pretty stories. He'll keep the terrible, ordinary truth. That courage is a lie we tell the dead, and the ones left behind must learn to breathe around the hole it leaves. The wind rattles the shutters like a ghost begging entry, but Daedalus no longer hears it. His breaths come shallow now, each one a labor, his once steady hands curled like dried leaves atop the threadbare blanket. The single candle by his bedside gutters, painting the walls with shadows that twist and leap almost like the silhouette of a boy in flight. His lips move soundlessly, rehearsing the words he's carried for decades, the ones he could never speak to the empty sea or the mocking stars. Forgive me, he whispers, and the plea cracks like the wax of those damned wings. I should have built you stronger, should have held you tighter. Does the air stir just then? A whisper of warmth against his sunken cheek, as if something brushed close. His clouded eyes strain toward the window where the moon hangs heavy, but there's only the night, vast and unyielding. Yet for a heartbeat, the scent of the workshop floods his nostrils, beeswax and cedar shavings, the tang of sweat and adolescent impatience. Icarus' laughter rings in his ears, not the wild cry of his last flight, but the giggle of a child hiding beneath the workbench, convinced his father would never find him. The memory is so vivid Daedalus' fingers twitch, reaching for a boy who isn't there. The candle sputters, its flame shrinking to a blue ember. Shadows press closer, their shapes melting into something like wings, something like arms. Daedalus' breath hitches. Is that, could it? But no, the room is empty, always empty. Still, when he closes his eyes against the gathering dark, he lets himself pretend. Pretend the weight settling over him isn't exhaustion, but a son's embrace. Pretend the wind's wail isn't just the wind, but a voice answering, I know. I know. The flame winks out. The wind falls silent, and somewhere beyond the veil of the living, where the sky is neither cruel nor kind, two figures meet at last, not as inventor and cautionary tale, not as failure and lesson, but simply, terribly, as father and son. The world forgets them quickly. The sea keeps no markers, but for one fleeting moment before the dark claims him, Daedalus is weightless again, soaring not toward the sun, but into the peace that has eluded him all these years. The last thing he feels isn't the cot beneath him or the chill in his bones, but the phantom grip of small, trusting fingers lace through his own. The parchment crumbles at the edges as the historian's fingers trace the faded ink, each stroke a whisper from a world long gone. Moonlight slants through the high library windows, pooling over fragments of poetry, receipts for wax and feathers, half-remembered court records, all that remains of Daedalus. The official histories have polished the story to a shine: the arrogant boy, the grieving inventor, the moral about knowing one's place. But here, in the margins of a merchant's ledger, a different truth bleeds through. Paid to Daedalus of Athens, it reads, for a wooden dove, jointed to flap its wings, commissioned for his son's 12th birthday. The historian sits back, breath stirring the dust. This isn't the architect of labyrinths, or the prisoner of Minos, just a father marking his child's years with toys. She turns another scrap, this one a sketch so rough it could be mistaken for a child's doodle. 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small, both crowned with lopsided wings. No signature, but the lines tremble with a tenderness no myth ever mentions. The official story never talks about how Icarus learned to carve wood at his father's knee, how he'd sneak honey cakes from the kitchen to share when Daedalus worked through the night. A breeze sneaks through the window, lifting the fragments like feathers. The historian scrambles to weigh them down, her palm pressing against a brittle sheet of poetry. The verses are water-stained, but one phrase stands clear. When you flew, it was not toward the sun, but from my outstretched hands. Her throat tightens. This isn't hubris. This is something far more human. A father who built wings not to defy the gods, but because his son begged to know what the clouds tasted like. Downstairs, the Academy's scholars debate the meaning of Icarus, their voices drifting up the stairs in pompous waves. A parable of moderation, insists one. A critique of ambition, counters another. The historian doesn't answer. She's too busy fitting the pieces together. A receipt for extra wax here, a scribbled note about stronger wing joints there. The truth isn't in the fall, it's in the months before, in the way Daedalus' designs grew sturdier with each iteration, the way he tested every feather himself, tossing models from the workshop roof until his knees were scraped raw. The candle gutters, its light fading, but the historian doesn't notice. She's found something. A letter, unsigned, wedged between 2 floor stones. The ink is nearly gone, but the impression remains, pressed deep into the fibers. If you read this, know I did not send him to the sun. I only wish to give him the sky. Outside, dawn stains the horizon pink. Somewhere, a bard is already composing a new version of the tale, one where Icarus is bold and Daedalus wise. But here, in this quiet corner, the historian weeps for the simpler, messier truth. Love doesn't always build wings that last. Sometimes, it just builds them with all the strength it has. The drafting table trembles slightly as the engineer's pen traces the final curve of her schematic, a painstaking recreation of Daedalus' wings, rendered in precise, modern measurements. Graphite smudges the edge of her palm, where she's erased and redrawn the central spar for the 3rd time, adjusting the angle to match fragments of ancient descriptions. Behind her, a desktop fan hums, fluttering the pages of her notebook, open to calculations scribbled in frantic margins. Tensile strength of beeswax, weight distribution of eagle feathers, wind resistance at various altitudes. The numbers are clinical, objective, but her fingers hesitate over the sketch of Icarus' wing joint, the exact point where the wax would have softened beyond salvation. She leans back, rubbing her temples. The physics is undeniable. Daedalus' design was revolutionary for its time, a masterpiece of biomimicry centuries before the term existed. The curved leading edge, the staggered feather alignment to reduce drag, even the subtle taper to prevent vortex shedding, it's all there. Her CAD software confirms it. These wings could fly. But the simulation also reveals the fatal oversight. No thermal buffer, she mutters, zooming in on the wax seams. The program's heat map blooms red where sunlight would concentrate, melting the bindings in precisely the pattern described in the myth. A chill slithers down her spine. The ancients blamed Icarus' recklessness. Her equations suggest the tragedy was inevitable the moment the wax left the pot. Yet when she closes her eyes, the numbers dissolve into something far messier, the image of a boy squinting against the glare, his laughter swallowed by the wind. She knows, logically, that no design could compensate for the human factor. The way euphoria dilutes caution, how adrenaline narrows perception until danger feels like just another thrill. Her fingers drift to a photo taped above her desk. Her own son, 8 years old and grinning mid-swing, his sneakers kicking at empty air. The parallels coil around her ribs like wire. How many parents have watched their children tilt towards some sun, powerless to shout loud enough over the roar of their joy? The workshop clock ticks toward midnight, but she's already pulling a fresh sheet of vellum across the desk. This time, she sketches not just wings, but a small figure, clutching them, his posture not triumphant, but tense with the effort of restraint. Her pen hovers over the sun, then deliberately draws it lower, cooler, a forgiving gold instead of molten white. It's a futile exercise, of course. History can't be redrafted. But for a moment, in the quiet glow of her desk lamp, the past feels less like a warning and more like a plea sent across millennia. Remember the hands that built these wings, but remember too the heart that beat beneath them. The child's eyelids grow heavy, but their fingers still clutch the edge of the blanket, as if clinging to the last threads of the story before sleep takes hold. Why didn't he listen? They murmur once more, their voice softening at the edges. The parent watches the moonlight trace patterns across the pillow, searching for an answer that isn't just about rules or obedience. Sometimes they whisper, brushing a curl from the child's forehead. The sky calls to us in a voice only the heart can hear. The words hang in the air, tender and fragile. Not an excuse, but an acknowledgement of that restless pull toward the unknown, the same one that lives in every child who's ever jumped from a tree branch, pretending it was a cloud. Outside the window, a breeze stirs the curtains, carrying with it the scent of damp grass and distant rain. The child's breathing slows, their lashes fluttering against dreams of flight. Not the tragic plunge from the myths, but the weightless joy of soaring, where the sun is warm and the wind is kind. The parent lingers, struck by how easily the tale bends to fit the listener. For centuries, this story has been wielded as a warning: obey or fall. But here, in the quiet dark, it becomes something softer, a testament to the wild, unspoken longing that lives in every pair of eyes that's ever looked up and wondered, what if? Downstairs, the forgotten storybook lies open on the couch, its illustrations glowing in the lamplight. Icarus mid-flight, his wax wings gilded by an artist's hand, his face alight with something between defiance and delight. The parent traces the page absently, remembering their own childhood version of this tale, the one where Icarus was reckless, foolish, a lesson carved in wax. But tonight, for their child, the edges of the myth have blurred. Maybe the story isn't about punishment at all. Maybe it's about the moment before the fall, that heartbeat of perfect, impossible freedom, when the whole world stretched beneath him, and for once, he was exactly where he wanted to be. Generations from now, another parent will bend over another bed, smoothing another blanket, as the same question hangs between them. The answer will shift with the times, a caution, a celebration, a lament, but the heart of it will remain. Because the sky never stops calling, and every child, sooner or later, will tilt their face toward the light and feel the old, familiar ache in their bones, the whisper of wings they've never worn, the memory of a fall they've never taken. The story lives because we do, and somewhere, in the space between the telling and the dreaming, Icarus flies forever, not as a warning, but as a promise. The poet's quill glides across parchment, each stroke transforming tragedy into something luminous. O Icarus, he writes, bright rebel of the boundless sky, the ink pooling like liquid gold under candlelight. His version soars, literally painting the boy's flight as a triumph. The sun, not a destroyer, but a willing conspirator in his radiant ascent. Daedalus warnings. A single couplet near the end, rhymed and tidied into something resembling paternal fussiness. The poem practically hums with its own brilliance. Icarus recast as a martyr to human aspiration. His fall, not a failure, but a fiery coronation. Listen to how the crowd murmurs when the poet recites it at the symposium, their cups of wine catching the torchlight as they lean forward, enchanted. Yes, sighs a philosopher, this is the essence of the tale, not hubris, but transcendence. A merchant dabs at his eyes, struck by the beauty of it all. No one mentions the way real wax softens in real heat, how a 12-year-old scream sounds when it's ripped away by the wind. Those details don't fit the meter. Meanwhile, in the shadowed corner of the room, an old shipwright folds his calloused hands tight. He's spent a lifetime mending broken hulls, patching gaps where the sea punched through. He knows what happens when beautiful ideas meet unyielding physics, but when he dares to mutter, "Feathers don't work like that," the poet silences him with a pitying smile. My dear man, this isn't about feathers, and that's the cruelty of art, isn't it? The way it sandpapers the rough edges of truth until what's left is smooth enough to hang on a wall. By dawn, the poem is everywhere copied onto scrolls, whispered in market stalls, declaimed by students who have never held a hammer or felt wax grow slick under their fingers. Icarus the reckless becomes Icarus the radiant, his story stripped of sweat and terror, and the particular way Daedalus' voice broke when he shouted, "Not higher." The myth is no longer a warning, it's an anthem, and the old inventor, he's just the man who built the stage for his son's glorious finale. Yet in the quiet of the poet's own home, when the applause has faded, something nags at him. He finds himself staring at his son's sleeping face. The boy is 7, with grass-stained knees and a habit of climbing things he shouldn't. The parchment trembles in his hands. For the first time, he wonders, what if the tale isn't about flying toward the light, but about the ones left standing in the dark, clutching the remnants of wings they never meant to test. But the thought is messy, unpoetic, so he tucks it away and reaches for fresh ink. The people want heroes, not heartbreak, and who is he to deny them? The vase glows under the museum's careful lighting, its curves catching the overhead lamps like the crest of a wave frozen mid-break. The visitor leans closer, breath fogging the glass, their own reflection blurring into the scene painted across the ceramic surface. Daedalus mid-scream, his arms outstretched not in flight, but in futile reach, fingers clawing at empty air where his son had been seconds before. The artist didn't romanticize the fall. Icarus is all but swallowed by the sea, only a single, desperate hand still visible above the water, the feathers of his ruined wings fanning out like a funeral wreath. What strikes the visitor isn't the drama, but the intimacy of the horror. Daedalus' face isn't noble or resigned. It's twisted in a way that bypasses myth and lands squarely in human anguish. His mouth is a black O of soundless agony, the whites of his eyes showing all around the iris, as if the artist had glimpsed the exact moment a parent's soul fractures. The sea, too, is shockingly specific, not some symbolic void, but a churning, salt-spattered expanse, its waves edged with foam like teeth. This isn't a parable. It's a snapshot of the second the world unmakes someone. A docent's voice drifts from a nearby tour group. "Notice the moral here," she says, tapping her clipboard. Excessive ambition leads to, but the visitor stops listening. Their gaze snags on a detail the docent misses: Daedalus' wings, still perfectly intact, every feather meticulously rendered. Of course they are. He built them to last. The tragedy isn't that the wings failed. It's that they worked exactly as designed, carrying him far enough to witness the one thing no parent should ever see. The visitor steps back, suddenly aware of their own heartbeat. They've known this story since childhood, but always as a warning scrawled in textbooks. Don't fly too high. Don't disobey. Now, though, the myth unravels into something messier. What if the real lesson isn't about obedience, but about the unbearable cost of love when it collides with the impossible? Daedalus didn't fail because he couldn't engineer better wings. He failed because no wings exist that can outfly grief. Outside, the museum courtyard buzzes with laughter and camera clicks. Visitors posing beside statues of gods and heroes. But here, in this dim corner, the air feels thick, charged. The vase isn't just an artifact, it's a mirror. The visitor thinks of their own father's hands, calloused from work, always reaching to steady them before they stumbled. Thinks of the times they'd shrugged off that grip, dizzy with the certainty that they knew better. The weight of it settles low in their ribs, a truth too heavy for moral platitudes. Some falls aren't about arrogance. They are about the terrible, beautiful necessity of letting go, even when you know the ground is rising fast. A child tugs at their mother's sleeve nearby, pointing to the vase. "Why is that man crying?" she asks, innocent as dawn. The mother opens her mouth, then hesitates. For once, the easy answer doesn't come. The visitor watches as she kneels, her voice softening. "Because," she says at last, "sometimes love means watching someone you give the sky to learn they can't keep it. And isn't that the heart of it? Not a cautionary tale about flying too high, but a lament for all the ways we try, and fail, to shelter each other from the fall." The museum's closing announcement echoes through the halls, but the visitor lingers a moment longer. The lamp above the vase flickers, casting Daedalus' shadow huge against the wall, a silhouette that could almost be any parent, any child, any of us suspended between the heights we long for and the hands that strain to pull us back. The visitor turns away at last, but the image follows, seared into memory. Some stories don't end when you stop telling them. They wait, patient as tide, for the next heart ready to listen. The echoes of Icarus' flight linger, not just in the brittle pages of ancient texts, but in the quiet hum of wind turbines straining toward the sky, in the shudder of rocket boosters breaking free of gravity's grip. Every time a child leaps from a swing, arms outstretched, or an engineer tests a prototype past its limits, the myth breathes anew. Daedalus' warnings and Icarus' recklessness aren't opposing forces. They're twin threads in the same tapestry, woven from the same desperate human longing to protect and to be free. Consider how the story shifts depending on who's telling it. To a physicist, it's a lesson in material science, the precise melting point of beeswax under solar radiation. To a psychologist, it's a case study in adolescent risk assessment, the way young brains weigh thrills against consequences. Poets see a metaphor for artistic ambition, the burn of creation that consumes as it illuminates. Yet strip away the analysis, and what remains is achingly simple. A father's hands, trembling as they strap wings to his son's shoulders, knowing they might carry him beyond reach. Artists keep resurrecting Icarus because his fall holds a mirror to our own fragile triumphs. The Renaissance painters gilded his plunge, turning tragedy into spectacle. Modern animators reimagine him as a spaceship pilot or a cybernetic rebel, but the heartbeat of the story never changes. That dizzying moment when ambition outpaces caution, when the dream in your hands feels stronger than the ground beneath your feet. Even our language preserves him. "Don't fly too close to the sun" has become shorthand for hubris, yet we whisper it with a strange reverence, as if warning ourselves not to forget the exhilaration that makes the risk worth taking. Science fiction writers love to ask, what if Daedalus had access to carbon fiber? What if Icarus wore a heat-resistant suit? But the power of the myth lies in its inevitability. No technology could have saved Icarus, because his downfall wasn't the wax, it was the human heart's refusal to accept limits. That's why the tale endures. Not as a stern finger wag about obedience, but as a bittersweet ode to the part of us that still believes, against all evidence, that we might touch the sun and come away unscathed. Listen closely the next time the wind rushes through a stand of pines or whistles around a skyscraper's edge. Somewhere in that sound, if you're quiet enough, you'll hear it, the faint, feathery whisper of wings beating against the air, not in warning, but an invitation. The sky never stops calling, and whether we answer with cautious steps or reckless leaps, the choice itself is what makes us human. Daedalus and Icarus don't just live in the past. They are here now, in every inventor's workshop, every child's backyard, every dreamer's restless glance upward. The myth isn't about falling, it's about the courage to rise.